The story of the LA Gladiators in Overwatch League Season 1 is strange. They started off very underwhelming, a below-average team with some decent players, but not nearly enough to touch the top dogs. Until, of course, they picked up SiR. This main tank, formerly of the London Spitfire, was immediately the most impactful pickup of the entire season. It was seriously like night and day. The Gladiators turned into legitimate playoff contenders. They just kept getting better and better, from going 6-4 to Stage 2 to 9-1 in Stage 4. A lot of people at this point thought that this team was the second best team in the entire league, just behind the NYXL. They rolled into the playoffs with loads of momentum, but then disaster struck. Just a few hours before the team's first playoff match, the most important game of the entire season so far, the LA Gladiators announced in a fairly vague Twitter post that SiR was on the bench. The player that had turned their season around, gone, just like that. The reports surrounding the reasons behind this decision are hazy. It's unclear whether the Gladiators benched SiR, or if he decided to bench himself, or maybe a little of both. Either way, the Gladiators ended up losing in the first round of the playoffs. SiR left the team for the Seoul Dynasty as soon as he possibly could, and all the fans could do was wonder, what if? What if the situation had been handled a little better from both sides? What if SiR had played for the Gladiators in the playoffs? Would they have gone on a deep run? But you can only look in the past for so long. Eventually, the burning question became, how the heck will this team recover from such a messy ending? That's what we're going to talk about today. Let's get into it. For the most part, the LA Gladiators will be keeping the same core that brought them a good amount of success in Season 1, like the DPS duo of Surefour and Hydration, two talented and flexible players, not to mention the support duo of Shaz and Big Goose, who had been playing together for nearly 2 years at this point, and two very solid off-tanks in Bishu and Void. Sure, neither of them are superstars, but you can expect them to be pulling their weight. That's 5/6 of a really good roster. But the obvious question is with the main tank position. As I mentioned before, SiR pieced out, it feels like, as soon as he possibly could. Their backup main tank, iRemix, was also dropped, along with backup DPS players Silkthread and Asher. So this key position of main tank, the position that really defined their season last time, was completely up for grabs. Who would be filling it? Well, for that, we'll have to take a trip to South Korea, where Contenders Korea 2018 Season 2 was coming to an end. The finals match between Runaway and Gangdu Panthera had been raging for over 3 hours at this point. They had played 8 maps due to a tie on the Temple of Anubis. But finally, Runaway was able to pull ahead on Ilios and earn the first major trophy of the team's existence. This was a massive achievement, don't get me wrong. I made a video a while back detailing the incredibly interesting history of Runaway up to this point, and if you want to learn about what happened after that, well, you can watch the Vancouver Titans season in review. Both of these videos should be appearing on your screen right now, but as far as this video goes, I want to focus on the losing team in this match, Gangdu Panthera. KDP has gone through many iterations throughout their history in Overwatch, housing legends like Bidosin, Rascal, Birdring, Void, and even SiR. It was with this roster that the team came in second place in Apex Season 3. These players were long gone at this point, yet KDP continued to find success in Overwatch contenders. Let's not forget just how close that finals match was. If one map, or even one more fight, had gone in KDP's favor, they might be our Vancouver Titans instead of Runaway. But second was what they got, and as such, this team would not be sticking together as they moved on to Overwatch League. From this team, the Gladiators picked up the main tank Roar. This was a really big pickup. Roar, of course, was considered to be one of the best main tanks in Contenders Korea at this time. I mean, the results speak for themselves. Roar was the kind of versatile main tank that showed a lot of potential on Rhine, Winston, and Orisa in Tier 2. He absolutely had some big shoes to fill, but Roar was one of the best candidates to be able to do it. But that wasn't even the most hyped pickup that the Gladiators made. No, this honor belonged to the DPS player known as Decay. Now, you'll notice that usually when introducing a DPS player, I'll make sure to specify whether they're a hitscan DPS or a flex DPS. Not this time, because Decay could literally do it all. He has this uncanny ability to change his aiming style depending on the hero that he was playing, which meant he could play pretty much any DPS hero at a ridiculously high level. This, along with the fact that there were just more teams in the game, is why there was a bidding war to claim Decay that was rumored to exceed a $300,000 per season salary, the largest Overwatch League salary that's publicly known. Of course, this was a bidding war that the Gladiators won, and with this, they got, well, I'll just let Puckett say it.
How about a brand new main tank? And some extra firepower. Oh, perfect!
The Gladiators had played this offseason about as well as they could have. They kept as much of the same Season 1 core together as possible, they had filled their hole on main tank with a very promising prospect, and even improved in some areas, adding a ridiculously talented DPS in Decay, and adding some depth to their support line in Reaper, who rounded out the team's trio of Finnish support players from Team Giganti. There were two main questions that people were asking the Gladiators. 1. Could Roar effectively fill the shoes that Fisher left behind? And 2, even if he could, was it enough to stand up to the true powerhouses of the league? There was only one way to find out. So the season started and the Gladiators weren't that great. Okay, to be fair, this was a brutal schedule to start the season. You had the Dynasty, the Shock, the Eternal at their peak, London, and Hangzhou. All of these teams were considered playoff caliber at the time that they played them. It's no shock that the Gladiators went 1-4 here, with their only win being against the Shock of all teams. However, remember that second question, if the Gladiators could legitimately become a top-tier team? As of right now, the answer seemed to be no, as the Gladiators struggled to adjust to a GOAT's meta. Roar and Decay, as great as they were in contenders, looked pretty average at the start of the season. In fact, as early as day 1 of the entire season, Fisher showed Roar just how far he had to go.
Moved up vertically, and that's an option, an opportunity, but still possible. He gets the reverse shatter. Just when the Gladiators thought they could push in to get the job done, he gets the earth shatter, and the Gladiators were not shielded, they were not ready for Fisher to turn around like that.
As far as Decay, it was kind of the same. I wish I could give him more credit, but Decay's Zarya just wasn't the hard carry that you need to become an elite GOATS team. And neither was Sureforce. He wasn't the only position having trouble either. Void's Diva was just alright, and Hydration was struggling mightily to adjust the Brig. He made a lot of errors, both in positioning and in ability usage. The support line of Shads and Big Goose was still pretty dang good, but the rest of the team struggled to keep up. They managed to adjust a bit and bring the record back in their last couple of games, but at that point, it was already too late. A 3-4 record was not enough to make the stage playoffs. In Stage 2, however, the Gladiators started to round into form. Sure, an easier schedule definitely didn't hurt them, but there were a lot of improvements. I'd say that the most dramatic improvements probably came from Hydration. He was steadily improving on Brigitte, to the point where he was fairly respected, which he honestly wasn't in Stage 1. We saw Void making a bigger impact on Diva, Decay was doing better and better on Zarya. The biggest problem at this point was probably Roar. I mean, he was okay, he was fine. I'll talk more about Roar a little later. On the brighter side, Stage 2 saw Sureforce taking the stage significantly more, which made us all really happy. Because the Gladiators, more than most teams, were willing to play comps off of the dominant GOATS meta, and when Sureforce came in, you knew that this team had something different up their sleeves.
With the nano boost, he was taking a lot of damage from those darts, and now Sureforce, he's in a great spot to get the damage done! And from long range, the Mortifier rings in, and he gets 2 for 1 in the last shot! Sureforce with 4, and Dallas Fuel hit the floor.
The Bastion comps that the Gladiators ran with Sureforce, while only viable on a very limited number of maps, found a lot of success when they were played, and it showed just how flexible that this team can be. The Gladiators had bounced back from their rough start in Stage 1, going 6-1 in Stage 2, qualifying them for the stage playoffs in the respectable 4th seed. However, it didn't take them very long to get 3-0'd by the Excelsior in the first round. The Gladiators were still really good, but they hadn't done enough to be considered one of the greats. After the mid-season break, the Gladiators took the stage with a slight roster change. Shore 4 would now be in instead of Hydration to play Brigitte on most maps. And honestly, even though Hydration had improved a lot, I think this was the right decision. Not only was Shore 4's Brave comparable to Hydration's, if not a little better, but Shore 4 opened up the possibility to swap to the increasingly popular Sombra comp if the team desired. So, with Stage 3 came tougher matches once again, like a game against the Titans and the Dragons, who ended up being the stage champions. And once again, the Gladiators beat the bad teams that they were supposed to beat, and were even able to put away a lot of the mediocre teams. But again, the really, really good teams, the teams that they had to beat to be title contenders, they continued to struggle. And again, I think it all comes back to Roar. I hate making the Fissure comparison. I feel like that's putting too many expectations on Roar's shoulders, but it honestly makes the most sense to think about it that way. When Fissure was in the game for the Gladiators, he dictated the pace. He walked in, went right up to the enemy's face, and said, "I'm gonna play like this, stop me, I dare you." And more often than not, the other team just couldn't stop him because the rest of the team was pocketing Fissure so much and letting him play his game. Roar, on the other hand, tends to do more of the reacting. He doesn't force the other team to play his game. Most of the time, it feels like Roar tries to adjust to the tempo of the other main tank and outplay them from there. But most of the time, especially against some of the league's elite main tanks, this ended up with him getting burned. Again, Roar wasn't bad. I want to make that clear. He was pretty average, and it says a lot that I'm singling him out so much just for being average. But we're talking about a team with championship aspirations, and for a team like that, average just isn't good enough. So the Gladiators would go 4-3 this stage with a +6 map differential. So in most other stages, that would be enough to make the playoffs, but not this time. So many teams went 5-2 this stage that there just wasn't enough room for the Gladiators. They just barely missed out on the playoffs this stage, further driving home the overall message of the season. So close, yet so far. Rolllock definitely helped out the Gladiators. They had been struggling to find their footing on GOATs, but now players like Decay and Surefour were able to play heroes that were more their style, their comfort picks. This team had been waiting for this moment to come, and their DPS players struck fear into any who opposed them.
What can he get? He does get the closer. That's a big one. AKM taken out. Big man there. Decay doing what he does best.
SiR in the previous one, they thought they could commit. This time it hasn't started well either. Shore 4 and Hydration. Went 3, make it 4.
That's a huge move. Going to work right now. I mean, I will point out, Hex, a little bit disappointed. Dropped down to 33% headshot. Got a 14. Let's go, make it happen. Come on, Shore 4.
Other than that though, everything was pretty much the same. Well, Bishu went over to the Guangzhou Charge, but Void had been starting all season anyway, so it really wasn't a big deal for them. Like in all the other stages, the Gladiators would end up losing their games against really good teams, like the Shock and the Spark. And these were both really close games, by the way. They were both 5-map affairs, but they just couldn't finish it. However, they did go 4-3 this stage, and as I'll always tell you, being good for an entire season is way better than being great for one stage and then cooling off. Because of this consistency, the Gladiators finished 17-11 overall, enough to qualify for the playoffs as the 5th seed. The Gladiators were a dark horse pick going into the playoffs. You never knew when they might go on a hot streak out of nowhere. They were really so close. However, there was one major statistic holding them back: the team's atrocious playoff record. That is, up to this point, the Gladiators hadn't advanced past the first round of a stage or season playoff in franchise history, and they had been to the playoffs 4 times. No other team was winless into playoffs with 4 appearances. If the Gladiators wanted to be taken seriously, they would have to clear that hurdle first. And the Gladiators would have to do it against the Spark, a team that they were 0-2 against in the regular season. But honestly, the playoff meta ended up benefiting the Gladiators quite a bit. Due to the nature of Orisa, the meta main tank at the time, the pressure wasn't on Roar quite as much to determine the pace of the games. In addition, OGs of the Overwatch League community would know that Hydration is one of the best Doomfists in the game. He was one of the very few players brave enough to play him in Season 1 and make it work. A Doomfist meta was made for him. Meanwhile, SiR took the reins on Reaper, which is a very comfortable pick for him. I don't need to comment on Bigus and Shaz, they were as good as ever, and Void played a good Sigma. And Hydration also played a good Sigma, I guess. That was fun to watch. This was a ridiculously close matchup. The Gladiators and the Spark traded back and forth, a full 7 maps of action where the Gladiators went up 3-1 in the series, but the Spark fought back. The game seemed to be slipping away, but finally, at the very end, one of these back and forth matchups with an elite team went in favor of the Gladiators. They pulled out the win here, and with that, the Gladiators had taken their first playoff win in the history of their franchise. But then they ran into a brick wall known as the Titans, and then they were crushed by an anvil named the Shock. There's definitely no shame in falling to both of the teams that ended up playing in the grand finals, but it was a disappointing exit all the same. In the end, the Spark even got farther in bracket than they did. The Gladiators finished Overwatch League Season 2 in 5th place, wondering what more they could have done to compete with the true greats. Okay, I feel like I've been a little down on the Gladiators in this video. Let's make this clear. I don't think the Gladiators are a bad team. I think they're a really good team, actually. The core of this team had been together for a very long time, and they had some genuinely good pieces in the offseason, and all that, really, it worked against most of the teams in this league. However, when I looked back at their season, the story that I kept getting when I looked at their results was a team that strove for greatness, and probably had the potential to do so, but always came up just short. No matter whose fault it was, they just weren't able to take that final step. It's a sadder story than I was expecting. But the Gladiators were still easily better than 2/3 if not 3/4 of the league. That shouldn't be forgotten. While the LA Gladiators weren't able to reach their ultimate goal, I think that the team can look back at what they accomplished this season and be proud. That's why my final rating for the LA Gladiators in Season 2 of the Overwatch League is a B+. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed looking back at the LA Gladiators season as much as I did. Did you agree with my assessment? How about next season? The Gladiators basically blew everything up, so I'm interested to hear how you think this new roster will do. Let me know in the comments. As always, if you liked this video, leave a like. And if you want to be notified for every video I make, be sure to subscribe and don't forget to hit that bell. I really do appreciate it. Wow, I wonder what team will be next. Let's spin the wheel to find out. Here we go. Whoa, what a surprise! The Boston Uprising! Man, I did not see that coming. Seriously though, to all the Uprising fans out there, and I know there's at least 4 of you, thank you for your patience. Your time is finally almost here. The final episode of Season in Review, Season 2, is almost upon us. But until then, don't get tilted.